Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to week 2 of SCM590. First of all, we had a couple of hiccups, which is not unusual in any of these kinds of cases, at least for me, anyway. On some setup issues, we've got all that resolved. Thanks very much to my colleagues. And so I think hopefully going forward, we'll have all the access that we need the first time rather than trying to figure it out. Part of this class, part of the first class is always for you to kind of navigate how I set these up. And hopefully you've all been able to navigate that. And here's my favorite device, Detective, which always shows up whenever I don't want it. So I think we'll be good to go. I hope that you were able to get some positive points out of the lectures in the first week. Again, what we did there is kind of set the stage for breaking it down now into the various functions and activities within the supply chain process. And by far, the most important process is demand planning. And there's a need here to distinguish between demand planning and inventory management. They are two very separate activities, two very separate functions. And we're going to talk about demand planning today, and we're going to talk about its influence and its impact on profitability. We're going to link it back into finance, and we're going to link it back all the way through how the demand plan drives the corporation. And I think my goal out of this is for you to understand that is that if you don't have a demand planning activity right now, it's something that I hope you can take from this class and you can try to introduce into your organization. And hopefully, if I do a good job with this, you're going to come away understanding why. So after we do demand planning, then we're going to talk about inventory management. Basically, again, demand planning is setting, looking out over a time frame, over a time fence or a time frame. The time frame can be annually. The time fence can be 13 weeks. The whole idea is that the closer you get within your time fence, you have to firm your plan, because everything that happens within the company emanates from your plan. So let's take a look at that and let's see if you agree. This is a very simple diagram. It's in fact really too simple, but it gives you some understanding of what I'm really talking about. This is the demand plan sitting up here. So the inputs to the demand plan are the market demands, and the market demands can come from multiple places, and they do come from multiple places. One is you're going to look at historical demand using whatever kinds of demand planning tools that you use, and we'll talk a little bit about that. These will be using historical data, and the tool will then suggest a demand plan going forward. My guidance to you is you do not accept that guidance or that forecast. That forecast becomes your stepping off point. So when you add in other market demands that history doesn't know, for example, you're going to have a promotion. All of a sudden you have a plant that's gone down. You have a supplier that's gone down. You have capacity issues with engine containers sitting at the port with inventory that's still in transit that you have to factor into all of your demand planning and your needs. You have changes, you have gains and losses in customers. You have changes in location. There's so many things that go into this that there's no tool, there's no algorithm or quantitative tool that's going to capture what you know about your business and what your colleagues know about your business. So that's what happens up here, and that's the key thing. So who should be there? Well, who should be there? You should have manufacturing there. You should have sales there. Finance should be there. All of the transportation should be there. Logistics should be there from the inventory management and anybody else. Um, the CFO, for the most part, represents the executive suite. Quality should be part of it if you've got quality issues coming up. So those folks, then you break that quantitative forecast down, and then you start to say, is this good or bad? And you do this at a level that you decide competitively how you want to manage your inventory. If you only have 25 items in your inventory, which I have had before, you can manage 25 items. If you have 5,000 or 6,000 items, which I have also had before, you can't do that. You can't manage every item at a SKU level. And so you need to have already previously broken apart and decided how you want to do that. We'll talk a little bit about that too as we go through today. So you then apply, let's say you're looking at an A item. So you're looking at a high volume item or a high margin item or a specialty item or a promotional item, something that makes that item an A for this particular demand planning period. So you may take that SKU and you may say, I'm going to, this is what it looks like by week for the next 13 weeks. And then you may look at the subsequent time fence at a quarter and then a quarter and then a quarter, for example. And you're going to set that up so when you agree on that plan as a company, it's a company driven plan. It's not driven by one activity, it's driven by the inputs of all these activities. And then that plan then drives net requirements planning. And so that's why it's so critical that you have all this up here and you don't take anything for granted. A recent example is containers coming in from Asia right now. It's capacity is dropping off quickly as the carriers are starting to rebalance to the new norm. You have the Korean vessel carriers, particularly Hanjin, as you know, which can't even dock or is docking very slowly. And so there are issues there that, for example, you can't assume you have transportation capacity. And you have motor carriers here in the United States that are suffering from excess capacity. There's a tremendous amount of overcapacity in that market. And so that is one of the issues that goes into it. The other issue that goes into it is where is this demand going to come from? And you may have different channels and you may choose to separate your channels out. So you may have an e-commerce channel and you may have a regular brick and mortar channel, or you may have a B2B channel and you may have a B2C channel. So these are all decisions you make, but the point is that if you elect to manage those channels separately, you have to forecast separately. And then you aggregate what those activities are. So we're expecting e-commerce to pick up, almost virtually move from 10 to 11% of sales upwards to 16 to 17% of sales. Well, that means where are you going to stock that? Because you're not going to stock that in a store. So what is your fulfillment strategy and what do you need virtually on a regional basis? And I'm going to show you that in just a second. But what happens from the demand plan that comes out of this is that gets transmitted to the plant. The plant commits the company to manufacturing capacity. It is committing resources to suppliers and raw material purchasing. And in so doing, you're committing yourself to transportation. You're committing yourself to financing it. You're committing yourself to space, packaging that you have to have, and any other components that go into your production plan. That then drives into a finished inventory plan, which drives into your field warehousing plan, the transportation required to support that, the order processing is looking at. They will be looking at where are these products, particularly in an omni-channel environment like that. That then drives the financial side of it here. So what happens here, and this is a process, not an organization, but what happens here drives the company. And that's why it's so important that you start out right, you get the best tools you can, and you get all the players around the table on a routine basis, on a regular, consistent basis, and you walk through this at the level of detail that's necessary, and then you measure the living daylights out of it at exactly those levels. So if sales says I'm going to sell 100 pieces, you measure, did sales sell 100 pieces? If you say I'm going to sell 100 pieces over the month, but 20 of them are going to be from e-commerce and 80 of them are going to be brick and mortar, you measure that. And then you're looking to just simply continually improve your ability to against the actual versus the forecast. What happened if I went over? What happened if I went under? And the individual or the department, or not the department that's providing you the input has to be held responsible for the answer. So if the plant overproduces, they have to be held responsible for the overproduction back into the CFO, and on and on and on it goes. So it's an extraordinary tool that has so many impacts across the company, and that's why it's where everything starts, and that's why it's critical that you spend adequate time in making the best forecast that you can. Even having said that, so here we are looking at forecast accuracy. This is a relationship between forecast and financials. Okay, so the more accurate the forecast, the lower your inventory is going to be. And so you have inventory affected by it, net working capital is affected by the financing of your inventory, your assets, then your return on assets are also affected by that demand plan, whether it's over or under. If you actually exceed your forecast, you've probably undoubtedly lost sales. So that's something that the CFO and the company is going to be looking at. We just lost sales potentially. So again, so you need to make sure that everybody understands that's part of it. You have a cost of capital factor, depending upon how much you have to finance. You have this cost of capital here. And if you have a spike that says, okay, I've got a seasonal item and I've got it up here, your rate may be different than your rate was back over here. And then you get into EVA, your shareholder value and your return on capital. These are all performance measurements that are looked at by obviously analysts, public companies, investors, whatever it may be. And the same thing happens over here. Net sales, which hopefully you understand that term. If you don't, net sales is net of its gross sales minus returns. Depending upon the company, it can be net of commissions. It can be third-party commissions. It can be net of a variety of other factors, just other than just returns. Some people put transportation in there. Some people, so it's kind of however you do it. Okay, and then cost of sales, of course, is the SG&A side. Then you have a tax situation, earnings, and all this gets driven into because of this decision here of that's made by the supply chain within the demand planning process. If what am I going to make and what am I going to sell, and the level at which you specify that is going to be driven all the way through the P&L. So hopefully that's clear. So what are some of those external factors? Well, I can tell you this is a list. These are the ones everybody thinks of right away. What's happening on POS? If you're in the retail side, many of you get POS data from your distributors or from your retailers. You need to know what the customer's inventory is, whether they're selling out or selling down. This is an input. Your quantitative system doesn't know that necessarily. It could, if you're getting this, it could know that. Competitive information, you're getting all these things. I'm not going to read them. This is a new one. This, of course, is becoming more and more important. I've been in a situation before where one social media tweet literally shut down a major consumer goods manufacturer because they got one bad social media hit. So it took them a while to recover from it. So this is something that I think more and more companies have people dedicated to managing this whole process right here. But here's a whole bunch of economic things, and all of these enter into it as well. And so if you're not familiar, if you're not using economic indicators, you should begin to familiarize yourself with those indicators that are driving your quantitative models, that could drive your quantitative models to a better answer. Okay, for example, today the CEO of Saks said that they're expecting a much stronger winter sales out of the stores than last year because the winter is projected to be warmer. Is projected to be colder. If you remember last winter, it was quite mild in most of the country, and so now they're projecting that it's going to be colder. So if it's going to be colder, that's good for those retailers who have stocked up on winter clothing, other than selling them in February at 50% off, which is exactly what happens. So here's another good one: unemployment rates, depending upon whether you believe the rate of U3 versus U6. What is the impact of U3 versus U6? That's really the question you need to be asking. If you don't know what U3 and U6 are, look it up. Housing starts, if this is the business that you're in. So GDP trends as well too. For example, we see government spending still is starting to come back, but it's coming back from a very low bar. Government spending had a very negative impact on Q2 GDP. Business investment had an even bigger impact on negative Q2 GDP, and inventory reduction, which we will speak about here, has another impact. So those three impacts: inventory reduction, which is being driven by the demand planning process, okay, coupled with the lack of investment from businesses, and government spending were the three big hits to Q2 GDP. How does that impact your forecast and your demand? So let's look why we need to know this. Well, we're not able to accurately predict consumer demand. We've tried. We have lots of quantitative tools that certainly were not around when I started into this business, and they're very good, but they still are not capable of really forecasting or quantifying consumer demand at a level of consumer behavior. And that is one of those external inputs that you get from order processing, from your sales department, from your distributors, from reading business articles, staying in touch with the market, social media, what's going on. So in your world, you're looking at shorter product life cycles, much shorter product life cycles, and there's many more competing products than there ever have been, and that isn't going to change. So this is one of the issues that you have, is you're constantly introducing new features, and you have a product lifecycle management, or PLM. You have a PLM approach or process that most companies are following today. We also have risk. We have uncertainty. We don't know in this extended supply chain that we have today, whether it's domestic, whether it's international or global, or whether it's cross-border, whatever it is. We have uncertainty. We have uncertainty in quality, quantity, cost, and delivery times, and it's paramount that you factor this risk into your inventory management strategy, which we cover next week. Not into your demand strategy, but in your inventory management strategy, that you factor in things like this. What is the risk of that going to be? And you use safety stock to buffer that risk. So to do that, you have to know, obviously, a whole lot about the inputs and the outputs of the overall supply chain process itself. So these are things that you need to be thinking about. We know that we know from a transportation perspective, but we also know from a manufacturing perspective that if you can increase the size of the consignment that you're looking to either purchase or looking to transport, that your cost per unit will definitely go down. So the reason that's important is that because you're being pressured for cost reduction, and if you're pressured to deliver tomorrow, you can't. These two are very difficult to balance out on an historical basis. If you've never been delivering the next day, it's tough to compare historically and say, well, last year you were doing this, and this year you're way off budget. Well, yeah, but this has changed. How we've gone to market has changed. The average shipment size has changed. The consumer is ordering one instead of a case. All these things enter into it. Okay, so uncertain demand makes demand forecast obviously more critical. And what and when, how much is the optimal quantity? And this then, as I said before, is linked back into the inventory policy, not into the demand policy. What you're doing in demand planning is saying, what am I going to sell? And that needs to be an input. Do I have the capacity? Here, sales says I want to sell 1,000. Manufacturing says I can only make 800. How many are you going to sell? You're going to sell 800. If you're, that's the answer. But you could have sold 1,000. So you need to document that, document it as a variance, understand from manufacturing why they couldn't make 1,000. What do we need to do to make 1,000? And this is all part of that process. So I talked a little bit about U.S. inventories and the fact that inventories have been a drag on GDP all of 2016 and still remain so today. This is a chart. This is a chart of what we call retail inventory to sales. There's also charts that are inventory to sales, not just retail, but this is retail inventory to sales. And you can see this is, of course, the recession in here where demand dropped off, inventories went way up, and then, of course, you brought them down. Either you didn't order other products or you sold off or you did whatever you did. But while you were running this down, you were unable to perhaps either introduce new items because you couldn't finance the inventory. You were unable to do things that you otherwise would have done if this line had held more true. So what we're seeing is it's been relatively at this number here, and now it's on its way back up. So this is telling us again that the inventory reduction, this is 2016 in Q2, this is telling us again that we still have a ways to go and we're going to go through another one of these. And whether you do that by not buying holiday product or buying less holiday product and that seems to be what it is because the port trackers are saying that the incoming container volumes are way off. So you're ordering either less, fewer of sizes, or whatever is happening. If you don't, you're going to have this. These are all going to be promotional goods. So your margins are going to be impacted negatively by that. Okay, so anytime you deal with a statistical quantitative forecast, it is a starting point. It is a tool. It is not the end all. So what you have to factor in there, just to repeat it again, is you have to understand the story. You have to understand what happened, why did it happen, and only a human is really in a position to have that input. So what you're doing in the demand plan is you're saying, this is what our business is going to look like. And that's why it's tied all the way back to the financial metrics. This is what we think our business is going to look like. If the executive office is saying, oh, we're going to sell this, and this is what they're telling the home office, and I've been there on that, then it's their call, but the company has to have a plausible, realistic, deliverable plan, and then what happens from that after you present it into the C office is you've done your job, and then you measure forecast to actual. That's what you do. So the data that you need gets to be extremely complex depending upon how you go to business. So again, we talked about this. If you're selling in a 1 hour window, you have to have visibility at a 1 hour window in order to understand your forecast. So it truly does get down to that. And this is why. Not here, but next one. Okay, so forecasting, demand planning, the forecast is always wrong. There's no question about it. The question is how wrong is it going to be? And that's why you measure. And the goal is to continuously improve and to continuously understand what's driving your business that didn't go right last month. Will it continue? Is it a trend? And how are we going to factor that in going into the next demand planning period? The longer the horizon, the worse the forecast, because you're too far out. You don't have the data at that level to be able to do that. So if you've got a 16-week or a 24-week window, If you're firm 24 weeks out, you're going to have some ups and downs in your inventory without a doubt. The other thing is the more that you aggregate your inventory planning from an item level to a class or to a family or to a brand or whatever, you're going to take all the variability out of the forecast. Logical, you see that that's okay on certain types of classes of products. You don't want to. My recommendation to you is don't do that on your top selling items, on your top margin items, on your competitive advantaged items. Don't do that. That's not what you want to do. So from a demand standpoint, you need to take that statistical forecast and interpret it. You need to take all these inputs we've talked about. You need to create a demand plan based upon what is the true business strategy and what are the business objectives. And you need to be able to distinguish and differentiate when you want to plan at an aggregate level versus at a detail level. So hopefully that helps out. This is the slide on what I was talking about. Most of the issues that takes place within inventory, and I can tell you this from experience, takes place at the weekly item location basis. So do you have the right inventory in the right location? If you have a multi-location network, do you have the right inventory in the right location at the right time? And this is where your service issues are, right here. This is a result of a pretty comprehensive 2016 benchmark study run by E2. And so when you aggregate up another level, then you get a better one. And then if you aggregate, like say a country level, for example, you even get a stronger one. So the issue from your perspective is down. This is where your inventory policy has to take you. But understand that your service level, which is critical, particularly in this day and age, where if you don't have the product where the customer wants it, when the customer wants it, like in the Home Depot store, and that customer wants to go pick it up, you just lost the sale because that customer is going to go to Lowe's and he's going to find it, or Menards, or Walmart, or wherever it is, or Amazon, and they're not willing to wait. They want it when they want it, and if you don't have it, there's enough inventory out there, similar enough, and maybe even your brand available on other sites and other locations that's a lost order. Okay, so demand planning, it is a tool for the manager. It is the guidance for a variety of decisions. It drives an enormous amount of costs within the organization, and it absolutely plays right back into the financial plan. So if your CFO is not interfacing with you on what are you planning to build, that's an opportunity for you to do that. There are a number of techniques out there available to do it. A lot of them are inherent. If you have an ERP right now, there are techniques within those ERPs. If you have an ERP, but their technique is not as sophisticated as what you need, which can happen, make sure you get a partner of that ERP and not go to a third-party software that is not a partner. So if it's not an SAP partner, I would strongly suggest to you not to go there. Stay with the SAP partners, stay with the Oracle partners, because then they will ensure that your integration is done, because that's what they do for you, is to make sure that happens. That comes from experience as well, several times. So here's some of the quantitative things that you can look at. But it can be very basic. You can run multiple techniques. You can run what I call a focus forecast. Focus forecast is a brand. It's actually a software tool available from Focus Forecast. Runs about 80 different algorithms, and then it comes back and gives you the best answer. You can run it anytime you want. It's more or less kind of an Excel-based thing, but I mean, you really feed it you feed it the data. I'm not seeing it used on hourly decisions, but there are far more sophisticated tools that are capable of doing that. But here's some of the quantitative ways that people can look at it. So in summary, matching supply and demand is a challenge. It's a massive challenge. It's a very expensive challenge, and drives a lot of cost and issues within the corporation. The forecast demand is always wrong. That is absolutely factual. The longer the horizon, the less accurate the forecast. The aggregate demand, the more accurate than disaggregated demand. But again, it's how you go to business and what is your company's strategy. If you need to be able to manage at a disaggregated level, then you have to have data at a disaggregated level in order to do that. Depending upon what your inventory policy is. Keeping in mind, you can have the A items in a multi-location network will change. So an A item at a corporate level is not necessarily an A item at a location level, and it changes. And so you're constantly readjusting that. You're not making an A item for the whole year. You're readjusting it based upon whatever parameters that you set. Make sure you use the right technique. Test different techniques and see what technique works best. That's the focus forecast concept, if you will. They're going to run your data through 80 different algorithms. They're going to come back and give you the best statistical ones, or 6 or 7. And what you'll find is that in general, you'll find that you can kind of concentrate and narrow this down to maybe 5 to 6 different strategies, but the tool runs anyway. And then make sure that whatever this plan is, you've tied it to the appropriate inventory policy in order to meet the plan. So that's where you get into discussions, which we'll get into next week, like I want to have a 95% service level on all my A items. Okay, if that's what you put in your demand plan, your inventory policy has to be set up to achieve that. Okay, so this is one of 2 lectures. The next lecture is going to be on sales and operations planning, which has a very personal touch with me. So we are done with that.